start recording. All right, well, hi everybody, welcome today. My name is Anna Weiner. I'm one of the parent volunteers in Grady's CCC, College and Career Center. We're a parent-run resource in the school. Well, we weren't in the school this past year, of course, but generally we are, but we're certainly available for students, for parents. We're just one of the parts of support at Grady to kind of help you walk you through this college process. Of course, there are the college counselors, there are the guidance counselors, there are other people there as well, but I think in the new space, we're all going to sort of be together, which would be great. So one-stop shopping for college help. So today I'm going to talk about financial aid. I am not an expert on this topic by any means. So please consider this just a kind of an overview and, just a basic kind of a quick view of like the terms you need to know and some of the concepts about financial aid. So I am going to share my screen, get my little PowerPoint going. Okay. All right. Just if you have questions, just, let me know. Put it in the chat. I may not see it in the chat until kind of the end, but I, will try to answer any questions. Again, I'm no expert, but it just kind of helps to hear somebody kind of go over some basic things. All right, so college costs, financial aid. They say that college is the only major life purchase where when you ask how much is this going to cost, the answer is, well, give us your grades and your tax returns and we'll let you know in a few months. So it can be very nerve-wracking because there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't actually know what a college is going to cost you right off the bat. You can look at their posted costs of tuition and room and board, but that's not always going to tell you, or usually it won't tell you what you are actually going to pay. So we know that college is expensive, but the reason that posted price is not what you're going to pay is because most students get some financial aid. Now, not always, but a lot of students at a lot of institutions do. So we're just going to kind of take a quick look at what financial aid is, where it comes from, and how you might be able to get some of it. So the types of financial aid, it kind of falls into two broad categories: gift aid and self-help aid. So gift aid is exactly what it sounds like. It's free money you don't have to pay back. So grants, those tend to be need-based gifts. You don't have to pay them back. Scholarships, also you don't have to pay back, and those tend to be merit-based, usually academic, but not always. There is another type of aid called self-help aid, and that includes work study. That's a program run by the federal government, and loans. Federal loans come from the federal government. So those are all two main types of financial aid: gift aid and self-help aid. The self-help aid is going to require something of you. If it's work study, you're going to have to work for that aid, usually a job on the campus. If it's a loan, obviously you're going to have to pay that back. So always keep that in mind. But also remember that when it comes to work study, even if you don't have an official work study job, you can still always get a job, probably on campus, off campus. You can work if you want to, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but my son did that and it was fine for him. So I think, if you're not working too many hours, you do have time for that, but that's just kind of up to you. All right, so what are the sources of financial aid? It comes from various sources. The federal government is a major source of financial aid. They provide need-based aid in the form of grants like Pell Grants and loans, and they provide work study. So the state government also provides some financial aid. In Georgia, we're very, very lucky to have the Hope Scholarship and the Zell Miller Scholarship. Those are merit-based, not need-based. based on your grades. And those can be used at Georgia state schools and in some private schools in Georgia. Will accept, a partial payment from Zell Miller and Hope. At least they used to do that. But mostly this is state schools, and you can't take it out of Georgia, unfortunately. Now, the college or university itself that you're applying to is also a great source of financial aid, probably the best source of financial aid. Most of the aid you get is going to come from the school itself. Now, generally, private schools have a lot more to give than state schools. So public schools or state schools, generally, they tend to be very affordable for people who live in that state. If you want to go to a state school of another state, you may not get too much aid for that. And also, please keep in mind that private schools that have the highest sticker price can often have the very best deals. So that is something that you're not necessarily aware of when you start looking. You look at how much a school costs, it seems astronomical. But what you have to realize is that at private schools, they have a lot of money to give. Now, where do they get their money that they have to give? Through their endowment, which is the money that they have invested through alumni and corporate donations, and also through the tuition that they are charging some of the students that are paying full price. So to get the government money, the federal and state money, you're going to need to fill out the FAFSA. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. In the college or university, often the private schools are often going to ask you to fill out something called the CSS profile that's how they distribute their funds. I'll talk more about the FAFSA in a minute. The CSS profile is more in depth than the FAFSA. Now, in smaller letters, I put private scholarships. I put that in smaller letters because that is going to be a smaller proportion of the aid that you get generally. Now, I'm talking about things like, organizations, companies like Coke, or, institutions, the Gates Foundation or the Kiwanis Club, or, sororities, your place of work, your parents' place of work, sometimes offer scholarships. The CCC offers a scholarship. We just had this year, it was just a random drawing, and we just had 3 $500 scholarships. But keep in mind that private scholarships, you can certainly apply for those. That is generally going to be a much smaller part of the aid that you get compared to the aid that you get from the college or university itself. So how do you qualify to get some of this financial aid? You have to demonstrate either that you have financial aid or that you have merit. So when I say demonstrate need, don't just throw up your hands and say, oh, no, we'll never qualify for that. You might be surprised. Even people who earn in the 6 figures can demonstrate need at certain schools. It just depends on the school and just how they calculate need. But to get that aid, you're going to need to fill out the FAFSA. That stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So that is always going to be free to fill out. If you're at some website that charges you, then you're not on the right website. It's FAFSA. It's really hard to say, .ed.gov, and that will take you to it. There are lots of tutorials and stuff too to kind of walk you through it. So the FAFSA opens up on October 1st of every year. I recommend going ahead and filling that out as soon as possible. It'll let you list the schools that you're applying to. When I say you, I'm talking to students. You're going to need your income tax. Now I'm talking to the parents. The parents are going to probably need to be involved with filling out the FAFSA because you have to it asks for student and parents, like income and asset information. It's really not terrible to fill out. There's a little place where you can link to the IRS website, and then that actually makes it pretty easy to just like fill in your information. I think somebody's got their mic on that might want to mute. So you're going to need your tax returns, like I said, and FAFSA and you'll learn a lot more about this specifically, but just so you know, FAFSA uses prior year tax returns. So if you're filling it out in 2021, you're going to use 2019 tax returns to fill that out. Oh, wait, I didn't say anything else about the CSS profile, but if you were asked to fill that out too, just know that it requires a lot more information from you and is kind of a pain, but worth it if you're going to get aid from a school. So after you've completed the FAFSA, you fill that in, you submit it, you will receive a number as your EFC, or expected family contribution. That's the number that the government says you can afford to pay for your child's schooling. That is very often not the number that parents think they can afford or that they can actually afford. So I don't know how they figure it out, but that's just the number. That's what the government says you are expected to contribute. And that's what schools will take into consideration when they're figuring out your need. So for example, if the cost of attendance, COA, of a given school is, let's say, $40,000, and the government has told you that your EFC, or expected family contribution, is $10,000, then that means your family has a demonstrated need of $30,000. There are some schools that will that guarantee to cover all of your demonstrated needs. So those schools, that's what they would cover. You can look up a list of those. Some of those schools, though, include loans, and some of them don't. So you just kind of want to be sure. And those tend to be the more selective schools. So merit aid, we talked about need-based aid. Let's talk about merit aid. So merit aid is awarded as a scholarship from the college. The government doesn't give out merit aid, but the college does. Usually, or the most common type is academic merit aid. You show academic merit, but you could also get an athletic scholarship or a scholarship for performance, for if you play an instrument, or some schools have scholarships for community service or leadership. That just really depends on the institution and what they're looking for. But we're going to focus on academic merit. Now, again, don't throw up your hands and say, oh my gosh, I don't have straight A's. I don't qualify for academic merit. Yes, you really can. You don't have to be the top student to get academic merit aid at all. But you want to think about applying to schools where you're going to be in the top quarter of admitted students.
In the top.
So was that a question for me, or is someone just not muted? Generally, schools that have merit aid to give, and I'm talking more about the private schools now, you don't see as much merit aid from public schools, but the private schools have more to give. And generally that top 25% of admitted students is going to qualify for aid, and really maybe more than the top 25%. And that's because every school wants the highest performing students they can get. And so they're willing to basically pay, I don't want to say bribe, but sweeten the deal for those top performing students to come to their institution. Now, if you're in the middle 50%, you may get some merit aid as well. If you're in the lower 25% of students that are applying, you are likely to not get any aid at that school. In fact, you're likely to be paying full price, and you are actually paying for the scholarships of the students at the top. So in general, if you're that could be a reach school for you, where you apply, you kind of barely get in, or I don't mean barely get in, but your grades are kind of at the lower end. You're less likely to get merit aid at those schools. So now, how do you find out if you're in the top 25% of a school's incoming class? It's not as hard as you might think. There are a lot of websites, and I'm going to mention these again, and I'm going to talk about resources at the end. But College Navigator, College Scorecard, College Board, they will all have, and I'm sure other places too, they'll all have a profile of the incoming class of students now. So you can see, looking at your grades, Test scores, if you have them, fewer students do at the moment because fewer schools are requiring tests. But if you have test scores, if you have your grades, if you know your class rank, and I think that that's included if you request your transcript from Parchment, I think it may tell you your class rank. But if you have that information, you can see kind of how you compare against the students that are going to that school, and how likely that can help you judge how likely you are to get aid at any given school. All right, so when you're admitted to a college, you're going to receive a financial aid letter or a financial aid package. So this is when you finally know exactly what it's going to cost you to attend a given school. And this will be, when usually this should come at the same time as your admittance to a school. So please compare these carefully because there's not a standardized format, and they can include any of a combination of federal grants, loans, or work study. If it's a state school and you qualify for HOPE or Zell, that will be listed. Any grants or scholarships that the school is offering you, and any loans, it might have loans on there. So that's where you have to be careful. Sometimes it looks, you get your financial aid package and it's, at first glance, it's like, oh my gosh, they're giving me all this money. And then you realize that a good chunk of that is in loans. So just, be careful about that. So you want to compare financial aid packages carefully. So let's say, that you get your letters back, and school A gives you a $24,000 scholarship, which is very exciting. And it's very nice to get that scholarship. They may call it the presidential scholarship, and it feels great to get that. But the cost of attending the school is $70,000. So that means the school is going to cost you to attend there $46,000 a year. School B may give you no scholarship at all. That feels kind of depressing, but the cost of attending school B is $30,000. So the cost of school B to you is going to be $30,000. So because the tuition is so much lower at school B than school A, it doesn't matter whether you got that scholarship or not. School B is still going to be less expensive and a better bargain. There may be other reasons to choose school A, but from a cost point of view, school B is going to be the more cost-efficient choice. So just remember to compare the bottom line. It may be helpful when you start getting all of these financial aid letters in to put all the information in a spreadsheet. I mean, you may not need to, but it may help you really compare them. This school is giving me so much of a scholarship. It's giving me so much in loans. It's giving me, this is the bottom line. This is what I'm actually going to have to pay. So you want to compare that bottom line. So let's say you get your financial aid award letter and find that there is a gap between what the school has awarded you and the cost of attending. So you still have to make up this, what I was talking about on the last slide, that $30,000, or you have to make that up in some way. So this is the time you may want to tap into savings or investments. If your parents or grandparents have set up a 529 fund, this is what it's for. You may be looking at private scholarships. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute, and I've already mentioned them once. Or loans. So, these are some ways that you can pay that outstanding gap. It's also possible to go back to a school and ask for more aid. My understanding is that it's not generally that effective unless unless your financial situation has changed. If your parent has lost a job or something has happened, the school may be willing to give you more aid. But generally speaking, you can always ask, and I think we have a book in the CCC about how to negotiate. I don't know how effective that generally is. So private scholarships we mentioned earlier, these are the sources of money that are outside of the school, and you can use them at any college. These are from the businesses, the nonprofits, your Coke, your Home Depot, and there are plenty of resources to find them. There are so many resources to find them, and there are so many scholarships. It can be kind of overwhelming to look for them. But also you should be aware that only about 5% of financial aid comes from private scholarships. That doesn't mean you shouldn't look for them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for them. But just know that it can be a lot of work because a lot of them require essays. Now, if you're really clever about this, and we had a student talking about this yesterday, when we had the seniors talking to juniors event, if you organize these and find ones that kind of ask for similar essays, you can reuse with just a little tweaking essays for the same essay for different scholarships. So you don't necessarily have to write. And then not all scholarships require an essay, but a lot of them do. Also remember that usually these private scholarships don't renew automatically. So you're going to have to reapply every year. It can be a big job just to kind of keep applying for scholarships. And one thing I've heard, I don't know if this is an accurate statistic, but I've read that you have to apply for 10 scholarships for every one you actually receive. I don't know if that's true or not. So I'm giving you some of the downside, but any private scholarship you get, that's free money. You don't have to pay it back. So free money is the best kind of money. And, I definitely recommend, if you have time, apply for some scholarships. It certainly doesn't hurt, but, it's going to be hard to make up, say $30,000 with just that private scholarship money. It can be done, but just remember, again, the biggest amount of money you're going to get is from the school itself. It's going to be the scholarships or the grants that the school itself offers you. So just always keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about loans for a minute. Many, if not most, college students will probably end up taking out some loans to pay for college. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Federal loans come from the government, and they may already be included in your financial aid package when you get that. They generally have a lower cost than private loans and more flexible terms of repayment. So private loans are the ones that come from, a bank or from Sallie Mae, something like that. So the government loans tend to be better. There's another way that federal loans are better than the private loans in that there's a cap on them. So if you stick with federal loans, you can't get into too much trouble. And, we've all heard stories, we've read stories about crippling debt, people who've taken out $100,000 in loan for their undergraduate education. That's not going to happen if you stick with the federal loans, the government loans. And, if you're having to reach that much, you really may want to ask yourself if that is the best college choice for you. Anyway, that's up to you. So it's okay to have some student debt. But your goal is to graduate in 4 years. Graduating in 4 years is one way to keep it down with as little debt as possible, especially if you're thinking about going on to grad school. That's when things can get really expensive. So, you want to really think about keeping your college loans down as much as you can. And just remember, you do have to repay this money. You'll start repaying it when you graduate or when you leave school. And even if you don't graduate, you still have to pay back any loans you've taken out. So, but it's the student's responsibility legally. It's not going to be the parent's responsibility to pay back loans. That's on the student. So just think honestly, be honest with yourself about how much you can expect to earn in whatever field you're gonna pursue. If you're thinking about taking out, $150,000 in loans to study painting. I love painting. I'm really glad there are artists, and I'm really delighted there are people in the world that do that. But if you're thinking about taking out a lot of loans to do that, the chances may be pretty good that it's going to be a struggle for you to pay it back on what a painter makes. Now, if you're going to be a chemical engineer, go ahead, take out as many loans as you want because you're going to be making a lot of money. But just be honest with yourself. How much can you expect to make in your chosen field? And you can figure out, there are calculators online. You should be able to, and you should, before you sign any loans, you should know what your monthly payment is going to be when you start paying it back. You definitely, think about that. And just remember, you don't want to spend decades of your life paying for these 4 years. It certainly may be worthwhile to take out some loans, but if you're really just crushed under debt, that can have a huge effect on the rest of your life. It's going to affect where you can live, what kind of work you can do, whether or not you can go to grad school, even whether you get married and buy a house. So, some debt is okay, but you can make the choice. You don't have to take out hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. And you really should strive not to do that if at all possible. So everybody on their list, we've talked about safety schools, if you tuned into some of the things last week, but everybody should also have a financial safety school on their list. This is a school that is an academic safety school, so one where you're in the top 25% of applicants and you're very likely to get in. It should be a school that you can afford even if you don't get aid. Now that would be probably a state school or even a technical college. I know a lot of people maybe don't get excited about the idea of going to a technical college, but if finances are really, something you need to consider, it can be a great way to knock out some of your required classes, and then you can transfer to another school where you're going to get your degree from. That's just, something you can keep in mind. And a financial safety school should also be a school that you're willing to attend. It shouldn't be a school that you just, would rather die than go to. It should be one that you actually would attend if you got in. Now, there are some ways that you can keep your costs down. One is to make sure you're qualifying for the most aid you can get. So keep your grades up. That's not important just for getting into the school. That's also important when the school starts handing out its aid, because they're going to look at schools that have a lot to give out. They're going to look at their admitted class. They're going to look at the top 5% first, and they're going to offer them all nice scholarships, and they might look at the next 10% and offer them scholarships. But the further down you get, the less scholarship money there's going to be. So you want your grades to be as good as they can, not just for getting into the school, but for getting a good scholarship at the school. If you're going to take the ACT or SAT, make sure you prep for that. Do your best on that as well, because that could also play into how much aid the school gives you, this merit aid. You can take care of some college credits now. AP tests, try your hardest on those. Really make an effort, because if you get a certain grade on some AP tests, some schools will accept that for some college credit. That's one class you don't have to pay for. So, AP, doing well on your AP test can help keep your costs down. Dual enrollment, that's definitely something to consider if it's not, maybe you already have all your plans for next year in place. But that's a great way to knock out some of your college credits in high school and get it done for free. So that's a way to keep your costs down. Choose affordable schools, the technical and in-state options that I mentioned. Private schools that have a lot of money to give. This, I've mentioned this a couple of times now, but definitely those ones that seem most out of reach can be the most affordable if you're in the top 25% of applicants to that school and they have money to give. And also, look at schools that guarantee meeting 100% of need. You can Google those. As I mentioned, some of those include loans and some of them don't. They do tend to be the more selective, more difficult to get into schools, though. So just to sum up, fill out your FAFSA, pick a financial safety school, keep your grades up, and apply to schools where you have the best chance of merit aid and schools that have a lot of money to give. There are a lot of resources to help you through this. This is just, as I've said, an overview. And here's some resources that I like. The Financial Aid Handbook. It's such a unmemorable title, but it's a great book. It's thin, easy to read. It's very readable, actually. We have a copy in the CCC that people can check out once we're back in the CCC. But this is a great book. The College Solution, this Lynn O'Shaughnessy, she has a website that's helpful as well. Paying for college, everything you need to maximize financial aid and afford college. Again, these are all books we have in the CCC, but you can find lots of resources on this. The websites I mentioned for the FAFSA, the studentaid.ed.gov, the College Board, College Navigator, and College Scorecard all have great information to help you see where you fall in the school's incoming applicants. And the College Solution I just mentioned, Lynn O'Shaughnessy. So these are all some good resources. I know it's overwhelming. There are all kinds of resources for scholarships too. If you want to start applying for some scholarships, again, I mentioned this is probably not going to be a huge part of the aid you get, but it can certainly help. You can start that now. You can, even if there are any younger students who have tuned in, you can start that anytime. You can start applying for scholarships. And that, is a whole nother discussion that I won't go into a whole lot now. But anyway, so that is my overview. And let me just take a look in the chat to see. Oh, someone says tax returns. I didn't know they needed that. I thought the income of the household was important. So you don't have to give them your tax return. You don't have to hand it over to them, but the information that's on your tax return is going to go into the FAFSA. As I said, there's a little button you can click where it'll automatically fill the information in. So are there other questions? Okay, good. I know you probably have a million questions about this, and as I do want to make clear, I am not an expert on this in this field at all. But I think, just maybe starting to get a little bit of a grasp on just some of the concepts and, just this really big idea that most of the aid comes from the school itself is kind of important for people to know. Are there any other questions? You can either unmute and ask or, type something. I'm looking at the chat now. So if you have any, if you want to type something in, you can. I'm gonna try, as I was saying at the beginning of this, I'm uploading all of these to these sessions to the CCC's website. It's not always easy, I guess, because it's a big file. It seems to take a while, and sometimes it doesn't work, and I have to try it again. So, hopefully I'll be able to get it there, pretty quickly, but I may have to come back to it later. But anyway, if anybody has any more questions about this? Oh, does Emory take Hope and Zell Miller? I believe that they do, at least partially. I have not checked that recently. So as far as I know, they do kind of take partial. Emory is also a school that has a lot of money to give. I didn't mention also on that College Navigator, it has so much information, as I said, and one of the things it has is there's a tab where you can, it's about all finances, and you can see is a financial aid, and you can see what their average gift to students is. So schools that have an average high scholarship that they give, that's really good. You want to see that. So yeah, there's so much information out there. It can be overwhelming, but I really want the CCC. I'm just assuming that we're all going to be back in the building in the fall. I want us to be a real resource for parents too. so much of this process needs to be run by the student, but really the financial part, for most of us, the parents are pretty involved in this part of it. But, you can definitely find a lot of information in these resources, but we can also kind of help you walk through if you have specific questions about things. Well, I like to try to keep these short, so I don't want to drag this out. If nobody has any questions, then I'll end the meeting. But just please contact me. You can always contact cccsahelp@gmail.com. And somebody can will try to answer your question if you have one or get back to you. But there's a lot of support to get you through this next year, so don't panic about anything. I hope that's helpful information. And again, thanks so much everyone for being here, and we're here if you need us anytime, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks everyone.